final scrutiny meeting of the civic year. I'll begin with apologies. We've had apologies from councillors Kendrick and Sue Sands, and no substitutes for those. Item 2, any members need to make a declaration of interest on any of the items today? No? Great, thank you. Item 3, the minutes. Minutes will follow, I guess, at the June the 18th meeting. Okay, fine. Now, it will become clear in a minute why I'm doing this, but I'm now going to alter the order of the agenda and bring item 9, which is the work programme, further up the agenda to now. And Alex, I don't know if you want to sort of walk us through that, please.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So just a quick.
Sorry, I just realised because I was doing it. I was doing this off script, and hadn't actually read all the bits that I was supposed to.
Oh, of course.
Got that kind of end of term feeling going on. So anyway, so I need to just cover a few things about matters of housekeeping. Firstly, in the event of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for this meeting. So if an alarm sounds, please evacuate City Hall by going down the main staircase and out to the War Memorial in front of City Hall. Toilets are on either side of the council chamber. Would speakers please use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Please mute the microphones when not speaking. The meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly. Set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash functions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting to my left and going around the room. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Councillor James Wright, Chair of Scrutiny.
Lucy Galvin, Nelson Ward Councillor.
Gary Champion, Sewell Ward Councillor.
Hannah Höchner, Nelson Ward Councillor.
Good afternoon. Councillor for Mancroft.
Good
afternoon, Richard Laws, Councillor for Bowthorpe.
Good afternoon, Mike Sands, Councillor for Bowthorpe.
Good afternoon, Chris Smith, Councillor for Town Close Ward.
Paul Roberts, Joint Interim Head of Environment Services.
Good afternoon, Sarah Ashurst, Head of Planning and Regulatory Services.
Good afternoon, Jan Robinson, Head of Legal and Governance.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Alex Cosme, Senior Committee Officer.
Right, thank you. Now that we've got back on track with that, Alex, if I hand you over to the work programme, please, item 9.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So a quick update on the work programme. This is the last meeting of the Scrutiny Committee for this civic year. The next meeting will take place on the 18th of June, and we're proposing that we bring Councillor Worley-Smith's paternity leave motion to that meeting on the 18th of June, as well as the councillor parental leave policy for a more comprehensive review of both of those. And then there's also a slight update on this meeting's agenda. Would you back to you?
Yeah, so we should have been, and we have programmed for item 6, problem and antisocial parking. Unfortunately, we've had some very last minute officer illness and other family matters. So I think 3 of the 4 people who could have been here to answer that aren't available. Councillor Galvin and I have discussed at our pre-meeting with officers and are proposing to defer this item to the 18th of June, which is the first meeting back of the new civic year, so that we can actually have people in the room who are able to give answers to the questions that I know we all have on that item. Just wondered to have any comments from other members on that, please. Are people comfortable with the notion of deferring that? Yeah, so that's fine. So we'll defer that. On the one hand, it's unfortunate we can't do it today. On the other hand, actually, unlike other years, the first meeting back is now fully programmed, and so we can hit the ground running with scrutiny, which I think is a very sort of positive thing. So thank you very much, Paul. Your attendance is not needed.
Thank you, Chair. It's appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. So now we'll rewind to item 5, and I know that Sarah which is nutrient neutrality. Oh, sorry, yes, all over the shop today. Before we go to item 5, Councillor Galvin has already spent a significant chunk of the day at the Norfolk Health Overview Select Committee and will give us an update of that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to give it almost contemporaneously to the meeting, which was an important one, looking at health inequalities, obviously over Norfolk, but that's particularly important for Norwich, and at NSFT, the mental health trust that has been so troubled, which was back there again. So there's two quite chunky reports, but I will send a full version into Alex, but just to update on some of the key points. If we talk about the one we did first, actually they moved the agenda around there as well, so it wasn't supposed to be first, but it's basically the health inclusion item. We asked the ICB to come back to HOSC to sort of explain to us some areas of how they're taking forward tackling health inclusion, which is obviously a really important topic of making sure that health services get to everyone and to the people that aren't included normally in accessing services. And that is a specific topic, inclusion health. So they have sent us a report. You can access the report, and we looked at it today and scrutinised it. And we've asked them to come back, particularly around the one item they'd commissioned, which is the WOW bus, or Wellness on Wheels bus, which doesn't have any data about its outcomes. And what we found out today was that they'd commissioned this bus. They own the estate, but they don't have access to the data of the patient, of what it actually achieves. So it was commissioned in COVID to provide immunisations, which was obviously quite a good use for a bus, but it's much less good use of a bus to deliver healthcare, especially to excluded groups who might not even know where the bus is, or much less want to come onto the bus because it's not staffed by medical professionals. So that was a useful piece of discussion, and we've asked to come back and look at that a bit more. And they also, in this report, didn't really have any cost of delivery plan or timeline or performance metrics, so we've asked them for that. So they are going to come back. What their time frame is, this report was a preliminary. They're supposed to be doing a lot more research, which we've asked them to base more on national data about health inclusion. They will come back then in October, and we've asked to see that report, and then they will actually commission next April. So at least we had a very useful discussion today on that. And the other item was, I'm sure we've all had, I certainly have had residents that have had a problem with accessing mental health support. There is that option 2 on 111. Option 2 is the mental health thing, and people can sit for an hour on that and not get anywhere. And the trust that delivers that service has had a long history of difficulties, and they are in a massive transformation programme. So they were coming to HOSC to tell us about that, and there were a lot of questions, not least from the 3 external people who Unison came along with a set of questions about staff. Then we had a user came along who's part of the user group who had lost her daughter. She had a lot of questions, and then we had a councillor, Emma Corlett, who's there to speak on behalf of people in her ward. So there was quite a lot brought forward to the trust for consideration, and again they're coming back because there is a problem, into an internal culture problem that they're trying to shift. There's also a huge problem of funding for mental health services, so they're being asked to do a massive transformation programme and deliver more in an area that's growing in need with less money. They're putting a lot of time and effort into it, and we did all visit last week Helston Hospital. Well, not all of us, some of us from HOSC went to Helston and were shown round and had really good access to senior officers to hear about the transformation programme and shown the units. Some people went to the new mother and baby unit, which is apparently amazing, and also there are a whole set of really good new wards. But the problem is there's a lot of people stuck in the wards because there's no adequate discharge plan, and yeah, that they're very aware. So the interesting thing for us to know here is that the model they're working towards is a kind of community mental health model. It's a 5-year plan. There will be one in Norwich, and these are kind of units that have 4 beds in them upstairs and have a crisis cafe and a recovery college downstairs, and the sort of more in the community. The slight red flag to me is that they're kind of rather much run by the voluntary sector, which is fine if you've got people that want to run them, but so that it's an interesting thing that we're looking at having one of those in Norwich, so councillors might be interested to find out a bit more about that. But if there was any questions, I'll send around us something a bit longer, but if you had any questions around experiences you've had with mental health or with health inclusion, it's very good to raise them through HOSC. And we're going to get the WOW bus back to look at again later on.
Great. Thank you very much for that very interesting report. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. Of HOSC, but was there any talk of Norfolk as a dental desert at all?
Not this time. We have covered that in the past, and I think it's due for an update and to come back, so I can ask where we are with that. I mean, the ICB, when we talked about it before there, we asked them to collect data on that, but they refused. They kind of said it wasn't appropriate for them to collect data, which was a difficult standoff to get into, really, because no one really knows how many people are registered, because no one's collecting who isn't being kept in the loop on that. So we'll ask for it to come back.
If I ask a question, who here lost access to their NHS dentist during COVID and they has a private dentist? I know I did. Yeah, so a few people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, mine happened much longer before that, when I was regularly commuting to and from London and on living down London. So I sort of managed to fall out of the dental system for about 6 years, and then found that actually going private was the only way around that.
I mean, I think this committee, as a scrutiny committee, I'm not sure exactly how it works in terms of scrutiny, but I think we can suggest things for the programme if I'm there as our representative, I think.
Yeah,
so,
yes.
If things come up health-wise here, then we can formulate them and push them on. It's not, it takes a bit of a while for things to rise to the top of the work programme, but it is important that we have a Norwich voice on there and use that.
I mean, absolutely. And I think, I guess, particularly from a county perspective, it could be quite a different committee makeup when the committee next meets, and so there'll be some, I guess, some sort of learning to happen on the way, and maybe almost a reset of the things that it's looking at. Anyway, thank you very much for that. And if there's no more questions, I will now hand over to Sarah to talk about nutrient neutrality. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few kind of slides to go through, but just a reminder that this report is basically just to provide an update on nutrient neutrality and give you an opportunity to ask any kind of questions on the report. I have to say, it felt a little bit like writing my university dissertation, writing this, so apologies for the length. These kind of slides really are just to kind of give you an overview of the report, because it was quite long and it was quite technical. And as I say, I'm happy to answer any questions. But what I really want to kind of focus on is the last couple of slides about kind of future work and kind of things that we're doing in Norfolk to try and address nutrient neutrality more positively and on a bigger scale. So why does it matter? Just very briefly kind of going through this. So excess nitrogen and phosphorus have placed the River Wensum and the broad special areas of conservation in what Natural England term an unfavourable condition. So effectively the water quality in those two rivers is very poor. The main causes of that are predominantly agricultural runoff, and I think we're all aware of the kind of fertilisers and waste products from animals themselves on the land, which finds its way into our water and sewage systems, but also kind of how wastewater and sewage systems operate as well, and kind of discharges. So there's been an awful lot of press around that over the last few years about the amount of outflows that are going directly into our rivers. New housing itself kind of adds a population pressure on top of those. I wouldn't say it's one of the main causes of nutrient neutrality issues, but it does obviously add a pressure. The impacts on the rivers are, and I'm no scientist, but it's a process called eutrophication, which essentially leads to algal blooms, which obviously takes up the oxygen in the river and affects species, plants, things that are really key to the success of those waterways. And it does present a real threat to species. I can't answer technical questions on the process of eutrophication, but I can take those away if you have any specific questions on the actual process of it. But it is a real issue in our rivers and waterways. So the impact in Norwich, it's a lunchtime I'll never forget. I'd taken a bite into a sandwich at 1:45 when I opened the email from Natural England on the 16th of March 2022. And effectively that email and my reading of it halted the ability for us to grant any planning permissions for developments adding overnight accommodation in both the River Wensum and the Broads SAC catchments. There are maps of those in your report. At that time, we had 71 planning applications that would have been affected by that, which had 1,256 homes or bed spaces impacted, and we were unable to grant those permissions. The Wensum catchment, which on the screen is the image to the bottom, affects only a very small part of the city. The real issue was the Broads special area of conservation catchment, which covers the entirety of our administrative area, hence the complete halt on planning permissions at all. We were quite quickly in conversation with other authorities where this had been a problem, and they said, oh, you know, we've got a small area affected, but we can still grant permissions. You know, what's the issue for Norwich? And I said, well, it's everywhere. So we are fairly unique in that regard, in terms of being a local authority entirely affected in our administrative area by this issue. The mitigation must be located appropriately within each of those catchments. So it gets a bit technical here, but in the Wensum catchment, because of the nature of the special area of conservation, the mitigation has to be upstream. Now, we're at the bottom of the river, so it's not so much of a problem for us, but there are other kind of locations within there, particularly some in North Norfolk around Fakenham, where there's not a lot of river upstream, so finding mitigation in that catchment is proving quite difficult. In the Broads catchment, fortuitously, mitigation can be anywhere within that catchment and still count as mitigation towards development. As I say, we did work really quickly. We got in touch with other authorities that have been impacted by this and had some conversations. We did a lot of joint technical work, producing nutrient calculators. We appointed Royal Huscaining really quickly, and I think we had our first kind of documents a matter of months after this had hit us, with potential solutions and looking at how we could address this. And that one of their reports kind of looked at what the potential mitigation strategies were, from kind of low level interventions right the way up to creating new landscape features that would help address nutrient neutrality. And we kept all our agents and developers up to speed on this. We held several forums in the halls, kind of advising them of what was happening. Unsurprisingly, they were fairly disgruntled by the impact that this was having, but, you know, in an effort to be transparent and tell them everything we were doing, we fronted it out and kind of had those conversations with them, which actually was really well received. You know, this has not been an easy situation for anybody in the development sector. We did work together to form a joint venture company called Norfolk Environmental Credits Limited, NEC Limited, and that provides nutrient mitigation credits to developers wanting to kind of mitigate the impact of their developments. That was created, I can't remember the exact date in the report, forgive me, but some time ago, and we formally joined that in May 2025. So credits were made available to us from July 2025, and that was part of the agreement to join. There was a slight lag time. So that was really positive, and as I say, we've now been able to kind of get some planning applications away, and I've got some information on that I can provide you. We've also kind of working together across Norfolk, lobbied government for a nutrient mitigation fund pot. So we got grant money of £18.45 million, and we are using that both in terms of funding feasibility. So if people think they've got a solution, we're giving them money to kind of investigate that further and see if it's got any potential. And we're also offering loans, so capital loans to people. So when they then produce their mitigation and start selling the credits, they then give the money back to the mitigation fund and we can reinvest that in future mitigation. So it's a cyclical mitigation fund, and we've spent a lot of money from that fund and got quite a lot of kind of credit schemes away, which are predominantly being sold through Norfolk Environmental Credits. We've obviously also got our own mitigation scheme. So we own a lot of kind of council homes across the city. So we have started a programme of fitting more water efficient fittings into those properties. So low flush toilets, aerators on taps and different shower heads to reduce the amount of water coming out. If you can reduce the amount of water going into the system, that can create a credit. So I think it takes retrofitting of about 4.73 houses to get one new dwelling away. Again, there is some maths behind that, but I'm not all over that, but I can take any questions away. So in our kind of planned upgrade programme led through the HRA, we were made aware of 1,793 planned upgrades and 2,460 responsive repairs, which would enable us to provide mitigation for just over 1,400 homes. Report was brought to Cabinet, setting out a kind of a policy-led allocation of those credits through our mitigation scheme, predominantly to get away those kind of priority regeneration sites or affordable housing applications that really support the residents of Norwich. So some of those sites, for example, were Anglia Square, Mile Cross, Burr Street and Argyle Street. So they've been allocated now. And then this really is where I kind of want to focus. So there's various things that are happening and kind of going ahead into the future. So as part of the government's response to this, I think they realised when the kind of the word came out about nutrient neutrality, the impact that that suddenly had, and government have placed a directive on water companies to achieve what we locally call their TAL, so technically achievable limits of their permits effectively. And they have to upgrade their wastewater treatment works to achieve those technical limits by 2030. So we are a little under 4 years away from hopefully achieving that. And that is expected to reduce the nutrient loads going through those kind of wastewater systems and reduce the mitigation costs that will face the development industry. More recently, under the Planning and Infrastructure Act, which came in 2025 in December, the government have introduced what's called environmental delivery plans, and these are linked to the Nature Restoration Fund. And these are two really fundamental changes in how the government and Natural England are trying to approach this issue. So environmental delivery plans enable a large-scale conservation intervention and a simplified developer process. So Natural England are writing an environmental delivery plan about mitigation specifically for nutrient neutrality in Norfolk. We are one of 16 front runners across the country. We've put our hand up and said we want to be engaged in this, we want to find a bigger solution. What it means in practice is that rather than buying credits from a credit provider, developers will pay a levy similar to CIL to Natural England. Natural England, who will be responsible for delivering the mitigation, will then say, thank you very much, we will take your money and go and provide a bigger solution, and you can proceed with your development. It gives the developer certainty. It gives Natural England the money to provide these larger scale mitigations. But what it really allows, that I think is really important, is this isn't just about making things nutrient neutral. It is about nature restoration. It is going beyond making things neutral. So hoping that we can restore nature back to where it should be. We are in discussions with Natural England, the development sector. There was a first meeting of everybody last Thursday, I think it was, down at Dragon Hall, led by Natural England, just to kind of talk about the work that they've started doing and to talk about how we can all get engaged in it. There's lots of stuff to work through, how it's actually going to work in terms of, will people need legal agreements? How is the credit levy going to be paid? What's that levy going to look like in terms of the amounts? We don't have a lot of that information, but what's really important, I think, is that we are round that table, involved in that conversation and trying to support Natural England to actually, you know, bring in something which is going to go bigger than just neutral mitigation and actually lead to that nature restoration. I've offered us up as a guinea pig to say, let's take some actual live applications through that process in terms of what does it look like, not just for the money that would then go into Natural England to provide the nature restoration, but in terms of development viability. Is that going to help us get development away, deliver homes across the city, economic benefit? But to be engaged in that process and work really closely with Natural England and MHCLG to make this work for everybody and all parties. So I think that is kind of my last slide. I think it really is about, we've had a very difficult 4 years, very difficult 4 years. It's massively affected the morale of the team upstairs. You know, we do our job because we love our city and we, you know, want to protect it for future generations, and to not be able to do that job has been incredibly frustrating for the officers. But we are where we are. It's had the impact it's had, and what we need to do now is work with other parties collaboratively to try and find a really positive solution that actually goes beyond just mitigation into proper restoration. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. I've seen Councillors Sands, Champion and Galvin, but I was going to ask my own question first. And it actually relates to the council sort of water efficient retrofits. To create some credits, and I guess I'm intrigued, would those credits then be used by council applications, or could they then be for private sector applications, and in which case does the applicant have to be water efficient, or could we be being water efficient to create credits for someone who's profligate with their water to then get planning permission? Thank you.
It's a policy-led approach, not a person applying approach, if that makes any sense. So if the scheme promotes significant regeneration benefits to the city, then they would qualify. If it's a scheme predominantly for delivery of affordable housing, they would qualify. But we would look at those and in discussion with the portfolio holder allocate credits accordingly. Most of those credits have been allocated. As I say, Anglia Square at the time was a private developer. It's obviously now in council ownership, and several of the other schemes were being driven by Lion Homes, so Mile Cross, Argyle Street, Burr Street. But there are, I haven't got the list in front of me, but it would be open to anybody, providing they're hitting the policy-led kind of things that we want to achieve for the city.
Great, thank you. Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sands, sorry, can you just double check your mic?
Yeah, that means developers, it brings up that scheme whereby developers will pay a levy, and that levy goes towards Natural England. Then Natural England is then responsible for providing the mitigation measures. Does that mean Natural England then has to set up some sort of system, probably mechanical, chemical system, which extracts nitrates and phosphorus from waterways? Because as far as I can see, the only way of mitigating things in the long term is to actually extract those elements from the water, and they're valuable elements in themselves. I mean, there's industrial and commercial applications. In fact, there's quite a bit of phosphorus in your bones.
So Natural England are a nature-based organisation, and a lot of the interventions that can produce, serious mitigation for nutrient neutrality is about changing land use, for example, away from agriculture, or doing landscape scale interventions like creating wetlands. So some, for example, reed beds will extract nitrate and phosphorus out to it's what the reeds kind of feed themselves on, so it's taking it out of the water so it doesn't then go into the water system further down. Natural England, and I don't want to speak entirely for them, but I do not believe that they would be looking to build mechanical factories that would take that kind of element out of the water. They would look to find landscape scale, nature-based solutions to the problem.
Did you have a supplementary at all?
I dare say I will in a few minutes.
Yeah,
when I've
okay.
ruminated. But
Let's move on to Councillor Champion then.
If I may, I'm going to stick on the phosphorus comment. I think what it is ever since this first came through, which I'm always surprised to this day that we found a surprise, because it had happened in the Solent already, and therefore there was a precedent set. And so, but nonetheless, the blame has been on agriculture, and I appreciate from a nutrient or nitrate perspective, agriculture is the main culprit. But when you actually look at phosphates, about 75% of the phosphates come from urban areas. So for instance, cleaning tablets you put in your washing machine are incredibly high in phosphates. And I can see nothing in this about any efforts to do behavioural change for urban populations with their use of products, or anything aiming at companies to reduce the amount of phosphates which they're putting in their products. And that the narrative seems to be perpetually that it isn't an urban issue. The prime issue is the rural environment, which might be the case for nitrates, but for phosphates, it's completely on its head. And I would be very interested to understand how we're going to, what we can do to discourage people, or nudge people, I believe that's the terminology currently in parlance, to nudge people in the right direction to reduce their reliance on phosphate heavy detergents and what have you, because if 75% of river runoff of phosphates is coming from the urban environment, that's very much within our gift. And I honestly feel that while we can, we could build giant machines to extract things from the river, or we could create wetlands, but often the simplest and cheapest solution is behavioural change. And this is particularly pertinent for phosphates. While I'm on phosphates, just because I feel it's worth mentioning, phosphates are the bedrock of our entire society. If we don't have phosphates, our agricultural system would collapse. And our entire phosphate system is based upon importation of phosphates from the Western Sahara, which is occupied territory. And I feel that's just worth saying on record, just because it's unpleasant to think that our society is based upon the occupation of a foreign territory, which we're willing to overlook for the betterment of our being. There you go. That's my little rant for you.
Thank you.
I think I'll leave a response to that latter point, if that's okay. I think just to kind of take a few of those points in turn, why was it a surprise? I completely take your point, and it had happened in other authority areas. We had no indication from Natural England that they were either looking at these special areas of conservation, doing any testing, or indeed what that testing was showing. We did very quickly raised with Natural England, why have you not told us that there is potential that this is going to come down the track? They had themselves taken legal advice on whether there was anything they could share with us in advance, and the answer very clearly from their legal advice was no. The minute we know there's a problem, we have a legal duty under the habitats regulations to address that problem. So Natural England themselves said, we would have liked to have told you, but we couldn't, because the minute you knew about it, you would have had the same outcome anyway, even if we told you 6 months before we formally wrote to you. So what we do have now, I think, is a much better working relationship with Natural England, but that does not come for exactly the same reasons, with a guarantee that something like this couldn't happen again. But we are thinking consciously now about what are the other issues up and down the country. So not just nutrient neutrality, but water neutrality, water scarcity, flooding, coastal erosion. There are a number and a myriad of very complex, complicated water-related issues for our region. We are one of the driest regions in the whole country, if not the driest region in the whole country. So we're looking in our local plan about how we can reduce further from our current standards people's water usage in new homes, etc. And I know, for example, under the devolution, any new mayoral authority will need to look at a kind of wider Norfolk and Suffolk water infrastructure plan to try and address some of these issues. But it was, as I say, very much a surprise, but there were legal reasons for that. I do agree, phosphates, come from urban runoff, etc. It's quite difficult to retrofit SUDs into a city to try and stop some of that going in. But where we do get new developments, SUDs are a requirement to try and reduce some of that kind of urban runoff. In terms of behavioural change, I think we need to be cognizant of what the local planning authority can control. And that's not me trying to shirk responsibility, but there are things the council could do more widely around behavioural change, but that's not within the control of the local planning authority. What we're trying to do is find a solution that enables us to keep us being able to keep the economy going and build homes. But there are other things the council could do around that behavioural change element. And I think, there is some kind of political lobbying which members may choose to do around some of that type of thing. And also the kind of the urban runoff is what I think government is hoping will be dealt with by directing water companies to achieve their technically achievable limits and upgrade their water treatment plant, etc., to try and kind of help this issue further. So I hope that gives a few answers to some questions.
Yeah.
Just on that last point, was that the Whitlingham Broad development is that what we're placing our bets on? Is that right?
No, this is actually Whitlingham Wastewater Recycling Centre being upgraded to be able to take more capacity into it. Years ago, I believe there was an Anglian Water Whitlingham local liaison group that has just been restarted with a view to actually more positively engaging and getting everybody around the table. We've had one first meeting, which did the usual setting out kind of terms of reference, etc. Members may want to consider whether they want to invite Anglian Water to Scrutiny Committee to say what they are doing. That would be entirely within your gift. But officers do go to the Whitlingham Local Liaison Group. I do ask some difficult questions. And I believe that we're actually all working in a much more collaborative way now so that we can start to avoid some of these things coming up in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Yeah, we have been around this one a few times, haven't we? And it was a real shock. I remember being called in for a briefing that day, but it wasn't really a shock to me because I'd worked for the Broads Authority for years and the Norfolk Coast Partnership for years, where we had a lot of chalk streams. So I was highly aware of the dreadful state of the rivers. And in fact, that was all based on a court case that meant action had to be taken because we were in breach of our European as a country, horribly in breach. So there was no choice. And as you say, it was a horrible, shocking way for it to happen. But that night when I sat there, I was relieved because I thought, at last something's happening. But we had to then scramble to make this work, which has obviously fallen on councils to do that and on developers, which has been we were starting with a blank piece of paper thinking about how do we do this? And it was really difficult. But I think credit to everyone for finding various inventive ways through, and hopefully now that's being picked up at a higher level. But I very much welcome the idea of involving other partners in this scrutiny because they are key players in this. Environment Agency with its testing, monitoring, Anglian Water, the source of a lot of these problems. I feel, I'd like to sort of propose that we come back to this and have people round the table and ask them these questions, which groups involved in this area. There are lots of groups working really hard who are very worried about the state of the Wensum. Obviously, this is about the Broads as well and the whole catchment, and it links into the wider water management strategy. As you say, there's obviously more ambition, but what we need to do is to kind of not necessarily put pressure on, but actually ask the questions of the right people who are, you know, Anglian Water. They're the business that runs these treatment plants. And by the way, they do have enhanced phosphate stripping out plants into areas. They have done that. They can strip things much more cleanly. Obviously, all cost money, and they can have better storm drains as well, and that costs money. So yeah, I think it would be, we could just flesh out a bit with officers how we might do that. And James, but it would be very good to have another item, another scrutiny session on the wider topic, and perhaps look at how it links into our own River Wensum strategy plan and group, and how we support and resource that to sort of restart it around those areas, but very definitely with those partners, with the catchment management groups, with Anglian Water critically, and with the Environment Agency. It's not really a question, but it's the beginning of a recommendation if people wanted to add to that. Or
yeah, I mean, I think it makes a huge amount of sense to get them in, and I guess there's probably a piece of work for the next iteration of this committee at its work setting meeting on the 4th of June to think about when that would be programmed in. But we can certainly, when we get towards the end of this item, we can have a formal resolution that would be a proposal, and I think that would make a lot of sense to be able to get, you know, people from those organisations in and ask sort of, you know, appropriate questions of them. Councillor Sands, I think you were next. And
yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Champion reminded me about the phosphate situation. This is a question which we have raised before, I believe. Gary may remember this. The use of urban phosphates, apart from perhaps people might put some on their garden, I don't know, but it's added as a brightener to mainly laundry detergents. So I'm wondering whether from the political side of things, we should be, because this is a question that's going to be asked in scrutiny groups up and down the country, should we be lobbying industry to remove phosphates from detergents, in particular laundry detergents? Certainly there are probably other and better ways of putting brightness into clothes these days, and do we need clothes to be that bright? I don't know, but that could be something that comes forward as a recommendation that we can then push on to government to in turn lobby industry to clean up their act, because then you're removing it from at source, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's a sort of a combined lobbying industry to remove at source, but also from a consumer perspective, get them to be asking the suppliers to not do it and saying, actually, I don't need my, you know, shirt to be as white as it once was. You know, I can live with a slightly duller colour, because people probably aren't aware of what the environmental impact is of having those, you know, ultra bright clothes. But yeah, very valid point. Councillor Fulton McAllister, you are next, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to talk about and ask about what actions the council are taking, and some of this might have been a bit more of a political answer if Councillor Hampton were here. I don't know if she was or not. I came in late. So I appreciate if you can't answer some of the political elements of this, Sarah. However, I wanted to ask about what actions the council are taking to work with Natural England and the Environment Agency to establish and to seek additional powers so that they can actually tackle the issues regarding industrial practices, which lead to the pollution of our water supplies, and agricultural practices which lead to the pollution of our water. Ultimately, those are significant factors, definitely more significant than the impact of residential properties, from my understanding. And ultimately, the Environment Agency and Natural England have much more limited powers to stop those areas, and it would be good to know what we are doing as a council to try to ensure that there are powers given to those agencies and us by government to ensure that we could regulate those more damaging areas.
Sarah, before you give your answer, just to update you, so Councillor Hampton had been here, or was due to be here for the next item, which was the parking, which we've now deferred, but she might still be in the building, in which case we just sent a note through, so she might be able to come in. So, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think as we kind of said at the beginning, and I appreciate you weren't here, we're very actively engaged in a new kind of arm of trying to address nutrient neutrality with both MHCLG and Natural England in terms of what's called the Nature Restoration Fund that developers can pay into, which will go beyond pure mitigation to a neutral point, but actually lead to proper restoration of our environment. And I think it's really important that we're involved in that, because it's trying to go further than we're currently doing at the moment. So we're very actively engaged in that. I think in terms of trying to seek additional powers to enforce around agriculture or industry, or powers to the council, I think that would probably be something for politicians to lobby government about, rather than for officers to do. So I would put that back to your domain.
Thank you. Councillor Herkner.
Thank you. I've got a question about the decision to not join the Norfolk, NEC to start with. And the report mentioned some concerns around governance arrangements and the business case. And I was just wondering whether they had been addressed or what they were.
Yeah, thank you. I think when we first kind of proposed to Cabinet to join, we did commit funds to help kind of set the company up, but there were some issues around the governance of the company and how decisions would be made, and we had some questions around the business plan for the company. Obviously, it's a not-for-profit venture, but it still needs to be able to continue its operations. We worked closely with the joint venture company to try and address those issues, and then subsequently, when we were happy that our concerns had been addressed, that was the point at which we returned the report to Cabinet and then joined.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? No. Okay. So we've got a recommendation to invite Anglian Water, the Environment Agency, and was there another group sort of added into that? So
you mentioned
the Whitlingham.
Be guided by. It would be good to scope that a little bit with with assistance from officers. I think Anglian Water definitely, and as senior a person as possible.
So we can get a scoping document together.
Yeah, the regional director, hopefully, of Environment Agency, maybe with the team if needed.
We get a scoping document together for the June the 4th meeting, which can then be looked at as part of the work programme. And then that would then be a piece of scrutiny at some point later on in the civic year. Sorry.
Could I suggest that it might be appropriate inviting Clive as one of the MPs for Norwich South, because he's done significant amount of work on the clean water agenda,
and I think
it might be good to hear.
Yeah, I'm thinking
some of that.
In particular, I'd seen some stuff from him in relation to the Channel 4 programme that's gone out recently in that. So yeah, I'm not averse to getting some sort of MP input. No, but I think, yeah. And he has come to scrutiny before for other things. So, sorry, Councillor Galvin, I think you also wanted to make a.
I was going to suggest inviting some of the people, some of the groups the user groups that are concerned around this. So there is a significant amount of monitoring going on via the Rivers Trust, Norfolk Rivers Trust. So they'd be useful to, they are the experts that are actually doing the work on it. Also, Wentham Riverkin, who are another group, the catchment management group. So the I suppose if we spread out the net, there's a catchment management group for the Broads and a catchment management group for the Wentham. And well, you have got other user groups that are very close to the river to the extent of being in it, like the various swimming groups, that I tend to find they have a very, it was them that alerted me first to the raw sewage quite a few years ago, which Anglian Water kind of don't like to talk about. So these groups, I think, would be useful to potentially involve in a scrutiny way if we are doing it a bit deeper.
I think it's just for that, it's finding the balance between perhaps getting a range of inputs and not overloading the number of people that are there for the meeting. So you're not able to get any depth from them. Sarah.
Could I make a suggestion? I think it might be good to understand the kind of the purpose of what you want to get from a second session, which might then inform who comes, because I think it would be very difficult to kind of have everything from Anglian Water's regional director or something all the way down to a user of the river in one session. So you might want to think of this from a different number of perspectives over a series of sessions potentially.
Well, and we're back to that potential for a task and finish group at that stage, where we could have a sort of discrete set of scrutiny for the various user groups and or statutory organisations, because the type of questioning will naturally differ.
Yeah, and I would also suggest get Natural England involved as well.
So I had Councillor Laws and then Councillor Galvin again.
Thank you, Chair. Possibly should add to the wish list of people that we want to involve in this exercise, but apologies if I've missed something, but obviously we're well placed here with the Science Research Park and the John Innes Institute, and picking up Councillor Sand's point, obviously one approach is to turn off the tap of phosphates and other things going into the water, as opposed to dealing with the problem once it's created. So it would be good to be able to involve the scientists who can think up ways of reducing dependence on phosphates generally, particularly in agriculture.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Yes, back to the scoping idea. I think this came from the idea of actually being able to directly question the people that are very, very direct involved in management of the river. So I think they are the top reason for doing this. But the secondary reason was to make sure that they're publicly questioned and that they see that people are concerned and care about this, which is why you've got that secondary audience really that need to be involved, I think, in a public way. So we are kind of hosting something potentially that shows them the depth of feeling, and there may well be, we don't want to make it, to dilute it too far, but I think it's important to bring people together, because that could potentially link into the River Wentham strategy going forward, and how we sort of reboot that, if you like, could come out of this.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could make another suggestion, trying to help you. Maybe a first session with Anglian Water, the Environment Agency and Natural England as the kind of the three main bodies involved in this. And I think a session, I'm quite happy to facilitate a session to kind of help you flesh out what you'd want to get from that, and kind of the questions to frame. And then maybe a second session to kind of think about all the current work streams across the council, the current motions that we've got, and how they might be better wrapped together into something slightly larger, dare I say, involving the users, a number of the interventions that we're trying to look at. So, for example, in the environment strategy team, we've got the Nature City Norwich, which will be able to provide kind of more of an emphasis around the river within that, and look at maybe not rebooting the existing, but actually framing something new that might bring something better with it. So maybe less of an item for Scrutiny, but a workshop with Scrutiny to think about how we might continue all the work that we're doing, but in a better way, in a more cohesive way.
I mean, this feels like there's sort of, rather than trying to write the scope via committee now, but actually something that gets taken away and brought back on the 4th of June. But Councillor Galvin, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I think if we can capture those points, which I'm sure Alex has, they'd be really immensely helpful as a kind of guiding star to set it off. And it sounds like it's somewhere that Scrutiny could really add value to the council's work.
Jan, for this, do you need a sort of, would you like a formally proposed and seconded resolution?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Just to say that that's what you intend to do, and that you will go away and, you know, put forward a proposal as a scoping document to bring to committee on the 4th.
Yeah,
well, it's not committee, but your work programme session on the 4th.
So
but if we could have a formal resolution, that
because I'm happy to propose what Jan has just said. So we take this away and it's brought back on to the work setting programme. Councillor Galvin, would you like to second? Yeah, that's seconded. And all those in favour, please indicate. Yep, that's unanimously carried. So thank you very much. So that will come back to the work setting programme on the 4th of June. So as we agreed earlier, we're deferring the problem at antisocial parking. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is enhancing deliberative democracy and citizen participation in decision making. And I'm going to hand over to Councillors Hooker and Stutley as chair and vice chair of that task and finish group to talk us through that. Thank you.
Maybe I start and then I hand over when I kind of wasn't able to come anymore. Hopefully everybody remembers that we decided to set up a task and finish group on enhancing deliberative democracy and citizen participation in decision making at the beginning of the civic year. That group then invited additional members, so it has members from the Scrutiny Committee, but also invited additional councillors to join the group to make sure it would be quorate at all meetings. And there's been a lot of interest, so that's been really great. We've met 3 times so far. First meeting was more kind of trying to work out the scope of and set the objectives for the group. And the second meeting we had experts from UEA join us. It was a very stimulating and open discussion. And so out of these meetings came a list of recommendations that we felt it was worth bringing to the Scrutiny Committee now. Obviously, the work is ongoing. There's kind of 2 parallel objectives. One is to generate recommendations for this current council, and one is to generate some kind of blueprint ideas for a future council in the context of LGR. But so in the first work stream, generating ideas for the current work of this council, and that's where these recommendations come from. Now, I wasn't at the meeting where they were spelled out in detail, unfortunately. So maybe, Ian, would you be happy to talk through them?
Yes, well, thank you. I think I don't have a great deal to add. My thanks to Rob and Alex for following us through the process, and especially to Alex for taking so many notes and relaying them so accurately in the report. So the last meeting we had, we were able to take some recommendations that had been put together as part of the previous 2 meetings. We fleshed them out and added some detail, and the list that is before you is essentially what came out of that meeting and recommendations that we think will be beneficial going forward. So hopefully people will agree, but of course we can answer questions rather, ask some more and add to the recommendations if we need to.
No, and thank you very much. I think it's a really interesting set of recommendations. Before we open it up to a wider discussion, Jan, can I bring you in at this stage just to talk through a couple of the sort of, it's like drafting governance tweaks, I guess, is the best way to put that on for some of those, just about who they need to end up going to.
So, you know, whilst the recommendations are fine, who you're recommending to, so cabinet, it's not always cabinet functions. So we just need to be clear. So to recommend, I think the first three should be to the head of paid service, because that is, so the cabinet the council's comms team is a council function which is run by the head of paid service, so that should go to the head of paid service. And again, the Citizens magazine. To recommend that the council staff induction, again, that's a head of paid service thing, so that should be head of paid service. And then 4 is probably okay, 5 is okay, 6 okay, 7 okay, and then 8 should be, to me, that I review the report templates, and again 9 to introduce new key performance indicators, and cabinet 10, I think that could possibly be the head of paid service as well. So if we can just change those, absolutely fine, but just to make sure that we get the right people. And I would also recommend that you put a date in there as to when you want those actions carried out by, so that it, you know, becomes much more measurable.
Thank you. And I'll bring you in a second, Councillor Steve, but I think on the date thing, some of those, particularly those first two, definitely ought to be relatively straightforward to implement, and would be the sort of thing I think we would expect to see hearing back at the first meeting of the new civic year that they've already been implemented. But Councillor Steve, if I just bring you in.
Yes, I was just going to ask about dates and how quickly we can expect changes. And obviously, cabinet meets in June for the rest of them, but I was hoping that some could be implemented earlier.
Yes, I think if we set the 18th of June as being when we'd like to hear back and hear back at that point, hopefully that a number of them are already in train.
I think that's entirely reasonable.
Councillor Sands.
Like item 10 in particular, as some people may be aware of. In fact, I think you joined in one of my tours, didn't you?
I did, yes, yeah.
I've frequently taken people around City Hall, often formally and arranged in advance. I know prior to COVID, if I was wandering past, there were some tourists sort of admiring City Hall, I would often informally bring them in and show them around. Probably shouldn't have done, but things are a lot less formal then. But I think the whole idea of opening the building as a civic building and bringing people around is really, really good. And I certainly love taking people around City Hall. It is worth doing, and all the groups I've brought around, both adults and children, have all expressed their appreciation. The adults in particular, I never knew this before, sort of thing, and it gives them a new appreciation of City Hall. I also quite like item 4, which I think we used to have an e-learning room, I believe, and councillors were notoriously bad for not joining in the e-learning online. I know in County Hall there's some e-learning there, and there's certain things which are made mandatory and councils have to do it. For example, GDLP was made a mandatory thing and everyone had to do it. And certainly I think 4 could be explored in some other ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Just on your point about, you know, opening up the building, I think you don't have to go too far. Get to Great Yarmouth, where you walk into Great Yarmouth Town Hall, and you're immediately greeted with a display cabinet with all of their civic regalia. So the things that we keep locked away here that no one can see except for, you know, high days and holidays, are there for any member of the public in Great Yarmouth to wander in and have a look at, which I think is really really good. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, it's on that point. It's a technical point really, but it would be good to just have access as councillors to the booking in system. So if that could be looked at as part of that, because at the moment we don't, and we did used to, so we can't book rooms anymore and we can't just book guests in. And obviously security wise, it would be much easier if you could book them in advance and book a room, then have to bring them along to the desk once they arrive and spend an extra 10 minutes sort of. And I think all staff have access to that system. So hopefully it could just be adjusted so that we can, it's on our intranet as well. And that's more secure then as well, because you know who they are in advance.
Yeah, we can certainly investigate that and bring that back.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I was going to say thanks to the.
Oh yes, yeah.
Thanks already, but it's been really a good process so far. Lots, you know, thanks to everyone involved, really, because
absolutely, and particularly, I guess those people who are external to the council who've come in and given their input, which has been really helpful, really useful. So I guess got Councillor Laws, then Councillor Stootley.
Yeah, just to say it's an interesting set of a very lively set of recommendations. Just wondered whether we could extend it a bit to include some kind of outreach to local schools and school children to get them learning about local democracy at some appropriate level. It may already be on the list.
I'll bring Councillor Herkner with a sort of direct response to.
Yeah, exactly. Just to respond. So I guess the work of the Task and Finish group isn't finished, and there are hopes to also engage with schools and young people and make that a specific focus of one of the future meetings. So there would be hopefully lots more recommendations related to that then. It's just, yeah, this is what came out of the first couple of meetings.
Yeah. Robert.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on that point. So we have made good, strong links with the university so far, and as Councillor Herkner has said, we are looking to expand that. So we've made a start in that area and looking to expand that through the group going forward. But there are links that are already now in place, and we've been talking to the academics at UEA about part of their course possibly being to come to City Hall to learn more about what we do here. So there are definite concrete engagements there.
And on a smaller level, I know we've had students from CNS have come along and watched Scrutiny before. So, you know, there is and I'd been along to CNS and spoken to one of their politics A-level classes. So there is an interest in local government certainly at that sort of sixth form level, definitely. So I've got Councillor Stootley, then I've got Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Champion.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to say that the the process isn't finished yet, so Hannah's covered that point for me. But on schools and particularly politics students, I've brought in some sixth formers in the past, and they found it really valuable. And one of them, I believe, wants to be a Green councillor.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. Yes, on a similar note, there was a group of pupils that we hosted from the Hewitt, and one of my suggestions was that they consider asking a public question. And thanks to Rob for clarifying about the age that members of the public can ask a question. So I think it was not at last full council, but the one before, there was a pupil from the Hewitt who wasn't in attendance, but the question was asked. So I'd like to think that you know, it's all part of the same process and the follow on from the visit. So I know it went down well. So yeah, I want to thank the officers for supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Champion.
Just to follow on the schools angle. My concern is that whenever we reach out to schools, the staff member who will volunteer to do the thing will be doing that above and beyond the their remit of their job in most cases, because they give a damn. And I think as a council, if we want to engage with schools, it can't be the lucky opportunity that we've found a student or a group of students or a teacher who's willing to engage. We have to create something that's truly accessible, and that means that we've got to do the legwork. We can't. I've been in school all day. There is no capacity in most of those institutions, state institutions, to engage more with City Hall unless we have really laid it out and done the groundwork. And I really feel it's worth emphasising that therefore we need to ensure that if we want to engage with schools, we need to make it explicit, we need to make it replicable so that it's not just some schools or some groups, and that it's universal. And I feel this is a really pertinent point because the government's plan to reduce the voting age to 16 would mean that the Year 9 students I was teaching today would be eligible to vote in the next general election, and their political literacy is potentially needing development. And so it just worries me sometimes that we talk about community engagement, but especially with schools, we really need to be doing, we need to really sort of lay it out so that we've got a pack that we can send to all schools so that it's an even playing field. I've done some inquiries recently asking about what schools are invited to come to different events, such as that Commonwealth Day recently, which I haven't received a response to. And I'm just curious. I just want to make sure that we're universal, that we are reaching out to everyone and all schools across our city. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to have. I'm feeling that there are now lots of hands about to go about school-related stuff because I'm about to make a school-related point myself. So I'm a governor of 2 non-academy primary schools in Norfolk, and both of whom have, in one way or another, engaged with this council involving pupils getting involved, and both of that came from their head teacher who led on that, and it was. Yeah, it wasn't an over and above thing for the members of staff who were involved. It was, properly funded by the school and that kind of thing. So, and I appreciate that it's probably easier to do that at primary than it is at secondary, having worked in both. But I think Councillor Smith was next, and then Councillor Fulton McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. Similar point on schools from slightly different angles. When I was teaching A-level politics, this reminds me that we had one student who did their work experience at City Hall and he really, really enjoyed it. So similar, I suppose, to Councillor Champion's points about what we do push to schools is that work experience angle of secondary school students, and most schools do it in year 10 before GCSEs, but ours did it at the start of year 13 for whatever reason. I know schools have different models, but that was a way of, again, experiencing City Hall and local government, which I'd never thought of at the time, even as an A-level politics teacher, I never thought it. And I think that student in particular followed around the leader of the council for 2 weeks. But I'm sure there's obviously numerous other ways we could do it. So then that's something that, again, the over and above angle, organising work experience placements for students in schools is always really difficult. So if someone does shove something in front of whoever's job it is to do it, they're going to do it. And in lots of schools, students don't know where to go as well around Norwich and Norfolk. So if they were presented with the opportunity to come to a place that is a prominent and established institution, it'd probably be really valuable.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with what Councillor Champion has said about it. It shouldn't be something which falls upon usually 1 or 2 very enthusiastic teachers who end up burning themselves out to get to this to deliver this type of project. Ultimately, where do we have resource in the council to deliver this ourselves as a programme? I think that it's something where we could be assessing the team in terms of the civic engagement team, where we have Lord Mayor. I know you'll know more about this than I will, Chair, but ultimately it's a situation where we need to think about what our priorities are for civic engagement. And I would say that the next generation is a key priority for that civic engagement. And rather than trying to focus on 1 or 2 schools, the same toolkit could essentially be rolled out to every school in Norwich to ensure that we are able to engage. And it might be we can only pick some schools because of limited time, but it does give every school an opportunity. And I would say that the priority should go to schools in some of our most deprived communities, because those are the people I'm sure we would all agree that we need to most reach out to, because often they are the people with the who find it hardest to engage with our civic institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking back to my time as Lord Mayor, I can't remember which school came for Commonwealth flag raising, but it was a state funded school. That year, for the Holocaust Memorial Service, it was pupils from Heartsease who were there for that. And certainly in my time as Lord Mayor, I remember speaking with work experience students who were here at City Hall and talking through the sort of what the civic function is. So there is some of that going on, and I think I think where the civic office can, they do mix it up. There are often some logistical challenges with where you can get schools from, particularly for things like flag raising, which is no more than a 15-minute thing. So schools aren't wanting to put up get a bus rented and various other things. So it's often schools that are walkable from this area. Councillor Galvin, then Councillor Sands. Or Jan, did you want to come in specifically on the?
I just wanted to come in on the democratic engagement part, because that is one of my key objectives, and I've always been, it's something that I'm really, really keen on. And so we're going to be focusing, and obviously we've got LGR to add into this as well, but we are, as a team, a democratic team and the civic team, focusing on 3 sort of key strands. And that is, encouraging people to be councillors without getting into the political side of it, what we can do to make, people more aware of what that role does, increasing democratic engagement with the public, and also young people. So they're my three key objectives, and we are gradually building on that, and we're already started with things like candidate things, but we're hopefully, in the past I've done films of councillors, why did I become a councillor, which we're able to stream, and have sort of candidate days where we can invite people in, show them around, and give them a sort of bit of an officer's take on what it involves.
I mean, it's interesting, use the word building. I think probably, to be fair to the council, it's rebuilding, because I remember relatively early on in my time here, so over a decade ago now, we were doing things like that. There were bits on the website, talking about what councillors did, and with non-political interviews with various councillors, just so that there was that sort of information available. Councillor Galvin, and then Councillor Sands, and then there was Councillor Steele.
Yeah, thank you. It's really good to have this discussion, because it all feeds into, this will all come back to that task and finish group, and they are. So it's good to have this sort of iterative process and hear that. And I'd encourage all councillors on Scrutiny to think of those ideas and feed them in to that group, so we can continue to add them in. I wanted to say something about sort of disinformation, misinformation and malinformation, which is 3 strands of work that the government's working on quite closely now, because they've become a security risk to this country, and the really important work we have to do here in sort of inoculating people against that kind of post-truth era. So actually, when people start to be able to vote, we have a real role to play in making it real and an option for people. And I will share actually, there's a framework I think we will be able to look at about those topics, and I'll put it on the Teams channel. And just a word about the Teams channel, I think anyone could be joined to it. We've got a Teams channel for that group, haven't we, where we can keep these kind of background and items for people to read, because there's some really interesting stuff around that. But I think it's really important security work, apart from anything else, to make sure we share these processes. So thank you for kicking it off like this.
Thank you. Councillor Sands.
Yeah, I'd like to support the comments made by Councillor Galvin. I mean, we used to have citizenship lessons in schools, and it came under PSHE, Personal, Social and Health Education. I don't know what the status of that is in schools at the moment, because I've not been in a classroom for quite a few years. But that's something that's possibly worth having a look to see what the status is within the curriculum. And also, I'm certain there are probably other authorities around the country that have produced education packs that we could look at and adapt. But the whole question that of misinformation, disinformation, etc., that Councillor Galvin mentioned, I think is a key element. Because we've seen what's happened in the United States in recent years in terms of, truth no longer matters. It's sound bites and disinformation and just plain lies, to be honest. And I think if we're going to promote democracy, we need to make people aware of those things. And it's something which, comes from us, comes from schools, and I think the government themselves have a vested interest in promoting democracy widely across the community as well. So I think there's quite a lot to be explored there.
Absolutely. Councillor Stutley, then I'll bring you in. Councillor Stutley.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just a note for Jan on this one, this recommendation 5 about public speaking and public engagement in the Constitution. So this has occurred to me since we had our meeting, and it was the full council meeting earlier this week. There was a number of members of the public there, and they were there. Excuse me, they were there to hear a motion that they were interested in, and left unfortunately early because they didn't realise when it was coming in the order, and they thought that my supplementary question was the motion. And unfortunately, we lost 5 members of the public. They have since watched it on YouTube because I've guided them to it. So I was just wondering whether something that we could do quite quickly is help members of the public with some kind of order of service for meetings so that they understand exactly what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the point I was going to make on that recommendation 5, obviously at full council on Tuesday, we did effectively deal with the Constitution Working Group's proposals regarding the procedural rules for council. So I'm not sure whether the Constitution Working Group will be re-looking at those in order to, but I think the point you make about sort of simple things to make it clear for the public is a really valid one. But I'm not sure if we'll see necessarily changes to the Constitution now around the procedural rules of meetings.
Yeah, just guidance for members of the public when they show up. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, so it's a point I forgot to add that I meant to make with the Resist 3 framework about disinformation. It's a government initiative, obviously, because they're getting a lot of a huge sort of flood of disinformation coming in, and I'm just wanted to ask Jan, are we kind of as a local authority, are we aware of that, and are we aware of any perhaps funding coming down the line? I was thinking if we could get ready with things that government might want to fund when the voting age changes. I'd imagine that in government they probably are looking at how to make sure information gets out there. So if we got some sort of projects ready at some point, there might be money coming nationally to trial or pilot things even. I don't know if you're aware of anything like that.
Not aware of anything per se at the moment, but sometimes, there is when things are instigated, they do tend to bring in some new burdens funding, which would come through to probably the elections team to help promote that. So, but I'm not aware of anything at the moment, but that may still come.
Councillor Champion.
I was just going to suggest, I'm sure you probably, that the Youth Advisory Board, which is run by young people, and I think in a classic way, it's sort of, we can make all the suggestions about young people, but ironically, we're talking about deliberative democracy, and so therefore we should speak to young people, and the Youth Advisory Board would be my recommendation as a initial port of call. And with government reorganisation, I guess if they don't, that will be something that needs to evolve to in the future. But yeah, just a point. Thank you.
Thank you. So in essence, I guess you've had sort of 2 strands to this discussion. The chair and the vice chair of the Task and Finish group have heard the comments that sort of sit outside of the specific recommendations we've got today, and no doubt that will form part of your future deliberations. But we need to formally adopt the existing recommendations as amended by Jan's note about correcting who they need to go to. So I don't know, Councillor Herkner, if you wanted to propose it and Councillor Stewart wants to second it, and then we'll put it to the vote.
Happy to.
Yeah, seconded.
Yeah, so I now will pop that to vote. All those in favour of adopting these recommendations? That is unanimously carried. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Sands.
Actually, one last point. Councillor Stewart and Councillor Hope have done a great job on this, and I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the next item was just a sort of information bullet.
Can I just also extend thanks to
Yeah.
Alex and Rob, who have done, the bulk of the work, really.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so the next item is just as an information bulletin for noting. So if you've got any questions, please email Alex, who will pass them over to the correct council officer, and then we'll then circulate the response to us. Councillor Herkner.
Yeah, I had a few questions or suggestions. How does it work? Do I pass them on as well? I think I felt maybe there was a bit more that could be done in terms of information gathering. There's maybe a few more councils that could be contacted or organizations that could be contacted. And I was also wondering whether maybe the Treasury Management Committee or whoever leads on that would consider reaching out to UEA and relevant researchers there to just establish more of a knowledge base, because it sounded like the survey wasn't particularly insightful because many people didn't respond. But I think there's others who are active in this space of ethical investment who might be willing to respond, but who haven't been contacted.
I mean, it's an interesting thing about people not responding to surveys, because there's been a sort of ongoing issue that we've had reported at the Treasury Management Committee of sort of trying to reach out to other organisations and local authorities to get their input on things, and to be met with a wall of silence. But I think if you want to pop those questions to Alex, then they'll ultimately then be circulated back to us. I know the Treasury Management Committee, for example, is not now meeting in April, but it will be reconvening, I guess, in June. So that can then be picked up by them as appropriate. But yeah, any questions just to come through? So in which case I'll be closing the meeting. But before I do that, it's the final meeting for you, I guess, Councillor Fulton McAllister. So thank you very much for your input over the years. I think you've been vice chair of this committee. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. So thank you very much, and we wish you all the very best for the future. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.